Ben, you've been in the room when these kinds of decisions are considered, and I'm sure been in the room when they've been rejected and when they've been decided upon. What do you think it was like today for the president to make this choice? And the latest reporting on it is that it was a specific response to a specific action taken by those Iranian-backed forces.
Yeah, well, look, it's the first time that Joe Biden has issued an order like this. And even though he was in the room for 8 years in these kinds of decisions, that's a big deal. And it's inside of Syria, so that's also a big deal. But I think what you can tell is that there was a rigorous process here. There was an event where an Iranian-backed militia, apparently inside of Iraq, killed a contractor who was working with the U.S. military, injured some others. The military clearly worked up a set of options for Joe Biden to consider. Lloyd Austin was the commander of U.S. forces in Iraq. He was the commander of Central Command in the Obama administration, launching the war against ISIS in Iraq and Syria. So he knows this part of the world. He knows these considerations. And Joe Biden, based on the reports, did not pick the most aggressive option here. He wanted to send a response and to try to end a cycle of escalation. The risk, of course, is always that when you take a shot like this, there could be a reprisal and you could face escalation.
Yeah, the reports are that President Biden chose the most minimal of the military responses. But my question about a meeting like this in deciding how to respond to this, is there someone in that room advocating no military response, a response other than a military action?
Well, Lawrence, what you'd have is the military probably worked up 3 different options, and the more robust option probably would have targeted other infrastructure associated with this militia, perhaps in Syria. And usually there is a lot of momentum to do something, particularly when there's been an attack on U.S. forces inside of Iraq like this. I think the cautionary note would be this is against an Iranian-supported target. It's inside of Syria. This could escalate things with Iran, including at a time when they're pursuing diplomacy over Iran's nuclear agreement. And so you might have some voices of caution saying that this could, again, prevent the success of diplomacy. This could escalate a military conflict. This raises legal questions in terms of taking a shot inside of Syria. But my guess is that given that this was a specific response to a specific attack against U.S. forces in Iraq, there probably was pretty broad consensus for some kind of response. And Joe Biden took the proportional response, not the response that might have been bigger, that might have had a higher risk of escalation.
Is the State Department typically represented in this kind of discussion, or is it in effect represented through the National Security Advisor?
No, I would assume, Lawrence, that everybody's at the table there in the Situation Room. I worked with a lot of these people. They're process-oriented, which we didn't always see in the Trump years, which would mean you'd have a meeting in the Situation Room, I guess virtually, maybe these days, with the Secretary of State involved, as well as the Secretary of Defense and the Commander of the Joint Chiefs. And Kamala Harris, the vice president, this obviously being the first type of decision like this that she's participated in. I would assume that Joe Biden would want to hear from all of his advisors, and then he makes the call.
And so you've got a Secretary of State who's trying to put the Iran nuclear deal back together, which is to say get the United States participation back in line with it. And this has to be a very, very difficult situation for everyone who's concerned with putting the Iran nuclear deal back together.
Yeah, you're weighing all manner of different conditions in the region right now, including pursuing diplomacy with Iran, including what we expect to have tomorrow with Saudi Arabia, including, again, some of these ongoing attacks in Iraq. But the thing, Lawrence, is all of these people, nearly all of them, were present in the Obama administration when there was a negotiation that led to a nuclear agreement, even as we did occasionally have these kinds of incidents inside of Iraq. Again, what's different here is that this one is inside of Syria. So I think in the past, this team has seen that you can do what is necessary to protect U.S. forces, even if it means taking a shot at an Iranian proxy, while at the same time trying to deal with the nuclear issue through diplomacy.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.